Hey everybody, come on in here. I hope you brought a beverage, because I don't have to tell you again that this goes a lot better with a beverage. Wine is good if it's that time of day where you are, or even if it's not. All right, simultaneous sip for the early birds. Oh, yes, we'll drink to the tears of our enemies. To the tears of our enemies. That's good enemy tears right there. Yeah, I heard that Rush Limbaugh talked about me today and pointed to my blog post, but I looked at his transcript to see what he said, and it wasn't there. But there was a link to my blog post in the transcript, so maybe that's coming later. So I wanted to talk about a number of things, but I tweeted just a minute ago, and if you have a second screen, you might want to open this, because this is pretty good. So the Wall Street Journal has a brand new article titled, "Donald Trump Signals Openness to North Korea Diplomacy in Interview." And there's so much good in here that I'm just going to read you some brief parts. But oh my goodness, there was almost, I didn't know what to talk about. There was so much, newsworthiness in one article. So it starts out by saying that President Trump has suggested he has developed a positive relationship with North Korea's leader despite their mutual public insults, signaling a possible, diplomatic openness. Then it quotes the president saying, "I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un." Notice he didn't call him Rocket Man. Timing is everything, all right? So Rocket Man was yesterday. Today he's Kim Jong-un. And the president thinks he has he says probably, which is the funny part, has a very good relationship with him. This gets better. Now listen to this. This is just mind-blowing. It says, asked if he's spoken with Mr. Kim. Don't you think we would have heard of that? If President Trump had spoken directly with Kim Jong-un, don't you think that would be in the news? So they say, asked if he's spoken with Mr. Kim, Mr. Trump said, quote, "I don't want to comment on it. I'm not saying I have or haven't. I just don't want to comment." Is that what you say when you haven't talked to the leader of another country? Now, because it's President Trump, you say to yourself, "Oh, I'm not sure he's always going to pass the fact-checking, might be a little hyperbole." But generally, if he's exaggerating or using hyperbole or just flat out, failing the fact-checking, in those situations, it's obvious what he has to gain. In other words, he's promoting his resume, he's promoting something he wants, he's saying good things about a program he wants. But what would be the possible reason that he would want to send the suggestion that he has talked to Kim Jong-un by not denying a direct question? I can't think of any reason that you'd want to lie about that. Can you? I mean, can you think of any reason that he would intentionally give us an ambiguous answer as to whether or not he's talked to Kim Jong-un? Because if the answer is no, it seems like that's just easy to say. And there would be no advantage that I can see in suggesting that he had. So the clear implication, and it's a little more dangerous with this president, because he is frankly less predictable than most people, even though I've done some good predicting with him, but on this level of detail, this is hard to predict. It looks like he's saying he's had some contact. That doesn't necessarily mean a phone call, but some kind of communication. Possibly. Let's see. Let's go to some more things from this same interview. This is the Wall Street Journal. You can see a link to it in my Twitter feed. I just tweeted it. Then he talks about the wall and renegotiating NAFTA, and he says that if he renegotiates NAFTA so that he gets a relatively better deal, which he would call a Trump deal, that the NAFTA improved agreement would effectively have Mexico paying for the wall because they would have less of a good deal compared to us. So in effect, it's like they're paying for the wall. It's not a bad argument. You know, if he gets a better NAFTA deal, I don't see how you could stop him from making the argument, even though it's, you know, logically those are just separate events. But in terms of could he make the argument, you know, so there are two things you have to ask yourself. Could President Trump get a better NAFTA agreement? Pretty good chance, in some way. And then would he claim that that was getting Mexico to pay for the wall? Well, he certainly could claim that. Now, would that technically, specifically be accurate? I'm thinking no. You know, more no than yes. But it's a really good argument. It's going to be persuasive. And if I were him, I would definitely try to get a better NAFTA deal, and I would definitely claim that Mexico was paying for the wall. So there was something else here about Kim Jong-un that I think I missed that I wanted to talk about. So he also said, he said, quote, the president did about Kim Jong-un, "I have relationships with people. I think you people are surprised." What's that mean? Could be good. All right, I thought there was one other thing here, but I'm not finding it. Hold on. Oh, back on North Korea. So they're going through the list of things that the president has in the past called Kim Jong-un. So he's called them a, quote, a maniac, a bad dude, mocked him for being short and fat, referred to him as Rocket Man. And of course, Mr. Kim has warned that he would, quote, tame the mentally deranged U.S. dotard with fire. Now, when I talk about the president and Kim Jong-un being basically the same guy, you know, just personality-wise, until you see it in the same paragraph, you don't quite get it. But let me read it again. So here's what the president has called Kim Jong-un: a maniac, a bad dude, short and fat, and Rocket Man. And then Kim Jong-un has said that he would, quote, tame the mentally deranged U.S. dotard with fire. Come on, they're the same guy. When the president says that you'll be surprised if he can get along with Kim Jong-un, he knows what he's talking about, all right? You know, that's not a stretch. We're talking about two people who, under any other circumstances, would be attending fights together, right? You know, if Kim Jong-un could get into the country, there probably would be pictures of him with a younger Donald Trump attending a boxing match somewhere. Let's see. So then the president says, "You'll see that a lot with me." This is his quote. He said about his combative tweets, quote, "And then all of a sudden, somebody's my best friend. I could give you 20 examples. You could give me 30. Let me say that again. I'm a very flexible person, he finishes. This is worth reading again. This is all gold today. This is good stuff. I call it Trumptainment. All right? So this is the president. He says, "You'll see that a lot with me," he said about his combative tweets. "And then all of a sudden, somebody's my best friend. I could give you 20 examples. You could give me 30. That's just brilliant. I could give you 20 examples. You could give me 30. So is it 20 or 30? He's made you think so far past that sale, you forget there was a sale going on there. It's like, well, was it 20 or 30? How come I can come up with 30, but you can only come up with 20? Until you see the pattern of how often he makes you think past the decision, right? The decision is, can people who he has once insulted become his best friend? Instead of just claiming that and stopping there, he's telling you that he can come up with 20 examples of it, but you could come up with 30. I could not be more Trumptained. And then he says, I'm a very flexible person. All right, there was a couple more Trumpisms in here. Oh, come on. Just give me a moment, I'll find it. All right, so here it is toward the end of the same article. This is the Wall Street Journal article. You can see a link to it in my Twitter feed. It says, the president encouraged North Korea's participation in those games, so they're talking about the Olympics. He encouraged their participation and acknowledged that Pyongyang may be trying to separate Washington and Seoul. And then the president is quoted as saying, if I were them, I would try, he said. And then he goes on, the difference is I'm president. Other people aren't. And then he said, I laughed for 5 minutes after this. This is his closing sentence of the article. He goes, quote, and I know more about wedges than any human being that's lived. I have to read this again, all right, from the top. The president encouraged North Korea's participation in the Olympics and acknowledged that Pyongyang may be trying to separate Washington and Seoul. And the president is quoted as saying, if I were them, I would try, he said. The difference is I'm president and other people aren't. And then he said, and I know more about wedges than any human being that's lived. He knows more about wedges than any human being that's lived. And the funny thing about that is, that might actually be true. Have you ever seen anybody who's put more wedges in more situations than he has? He might have, that might be the most legitimate thing he's ever said. That he knows more about wedges than anyone that's lived. All right. Those of you who follow my periscopes, the first time that we heard that North Korea wanted to talk to South Korea, and the first conversations were about the Olympics, what was the first thing I said when I got on Periscope and said, don't get too happy about this because it's a wedge strategy. So I believe you heard it from me if you listened to that Periscope that North Korea was pursuing a wedge strategy. Everybody who observes North Korea knows that's what it was. So, but I just wanted to call out that I might be the first to actually use that word, but it's the obvious interpretation. Oh my God. All right. So here's the thing. It does appear true that President Trump has some kind of back channel communication with Kim Jong-un. And let's talk about Senator Adams in a minute. And it does appear that they have some kind of weird same person in a different body compatibility, at least in terms of the rhetoric and the way they talk. And if I may be so bold, sense of humor. All right, now this is something that I'm not entirely sure that the women, this is going to be sexist, I know that. I'm not entirely sure that women understand the world of guys talking to other guys. All right, so it's not so sexist as it is that, no man really knows what it's like that when two women are talking to each other privately. Likewise, two women don't know private conversations between men. They don't look like what you think they look like in all likelihood. So you just don't know. But the importance of this specific kind of humor to male bonding is a much bigger deal than anybody wants to admit. All right? The fact that President Trump and Little Rocket Man have in public called each other, short and fat and, a mentally unstable dotard, that fact makes them friends. That doesn't make them enemies, because in both cases it was kind of funny. And they both knew that it was at least a little bit tongue-in-cheek. They both knew that it was over the top. They both knew it was hyperbole. And so from a bonding perspective, they are pacing each other in a way that we've never seen before. And I've also made the point that one of the things that North Korea has always wanted is some kind of respect, a place at the table, just being treated as a legitimate partner. They want the respect internationally. And the president has had a direct conversation, even if it's through public statements, with Kim Jong-un. In this weird social media Twitter way, these are personal messages to each other. You're a dotard. You're Rocket Man. They're talking. And that does elevate Rocket Man, Kim Jong-un, to sort of the same level rhetorically. So in a weird way, it put them on some kind of even plane that North Korea has always tried to achieve. But in a weird, indirect, backstreet kind of a way. It just happened to accomplish that. And likewise with all this back and forth, it just sort of puts Kim Jong-un on an even plane. And when you hear the president say stuff like he would be willing to talk to him anytime, he still needs to get rid of the nukes. But yes, I'd be willing to he even said he'd take a phone call. Just imagine that. Imagine the difference between saying, so here's a traditional president. Traditional president says, well, under the right preconditions, we could have a multilateral conversation, which of course would be, China and South Korea and maybe Japan has to be part of this too. And, let's get Russia in here. And, maybe 8 months from now, we could have something set up in a neutral territory. And it would just be like every other time that didn't work. But what does President Trump say? Yeah, I would take a phone call. Like, that's a complete change in how you feel about everything, right? And it certainly takes the tension down. It's like, yeah, I would take a phone call. I'm not sure a phone call is a good idea, but in terms of persuasion and just bringing down the temperature and showing people that these are people who can talk, it's all good on that level. So while I do not yet see something that looks like a breakthrough with North Korea, because if they're not talking about the nukes, they're not talking about anything. We're not really seeing a breakthrough, but we're seeing conversation, and that's not always bad. So let's talk about the news that isn't news. So we're seeing reports that there was some kind of DACA agreement. At least 6 senators came up with some bipartisan thing. But I just saw the news just moments ago that the president has already rejected it and sent them back to renegotiate. So I believe that was flake news, if you know what I mean. Flake news, get it? It was flake news. But that doesn't mean it's far away either. So they might be able to get it yet. Oh, so let's talk about Senator Dianne Feinstein. Feinstein, yeah. Um, you may have seen that she was the one who released those transcripts without getting permission, and she had these bizarre explanations for it. First, she said she thought she was being pressured. Then she said she wasn't pressured, and she said, it was on her that she didn't get it, and she doesn't know why she didn't get permission, which was weird, especially to admit it. And then the current version is that she's had a bad cold, and she's saying directly that it affected her thinking. Think about that. She's admitted in public, and by the way, I have to say I respect that. Like, I love the transparency. I mean, maybe it's less transparent than it should be, but when somebody has a brain malfunction and they come out right away and say, I'm having trouble explaining this, I had a brain malfunction, I respect that. I mean, I really do. Like, as much as you can respect anything. But we've got questions, right? This requires some follow-up questions. So although her reasons for why she had a mental lapse there, while her reasons may not be completely accurate, the fact that she fessed to a mental problem is kind of noble. I don't know. I kind of like it. You just don't see that kind of honesty from people. It's weird. But I joked when I heard that story that I was one step closer to being Senator Adams. Now I say that because it seems impossible that she could be reelected after this. Does everybody agree, by the way? Now, I'm not saying that from some kind of Republican partisan perspective. I don't see her own side reelecting her after those statements in public. Because if you can make a decision, an important decision poorly because you had a cold, if you take her at her word, you can't really reelect her. And I say that with respect. Right? So with full respect to Senator Feinstein? I forget how to pronounce her name. But with full respect, I think it's time to honor her service, and it might be time for her to make a graceful exit. So once you take the incumbent out, so I guess my point is, once the incumbent is out, everybody goes up a notch in terms of the likelihood that they'll become the next senator. So I just joked that I was one step closer to the Senate. I don't want the job, by the way. Sounds like a terrible job. Compare being a senator to what I do. All right, most of you know what I do for a living, right? So I'm like drawing comics, and I'm sitting here in my nice house in California where the weather is great most of the time. Got my dog. I don't know if you noticed my dog. So here's an example of my typical day. Sitting in my house, talking to you guys, petting my dog. Who would want to be a senator? Can you imagine that? Like, I'd have to buy a suit, right? If I were a senator, I'd have to wear a necktie. Not going to happen. Yeah, and my politics are left to Bernie, so I could run as a Democrat and get elected. Am I even wearing shoes? Actually, I'm in my gym clothes. I need to work out. Where is Christina? She is elsewhere doing some stuff. All right, the market is booming. Okay, I'm going to sign off now. Oh, do you think Trump is slow playing FISA? Oh, let's talk about the FISA tweets. Now, here again, we're seeing the perfect example of two movies playing on the same screen. When I read the two FISA tweets where the president is alleged to have said one thing and then reversed himself in the second tweet, I didn't see it. I've read it over and over again, and I just don't see it. I'm looking right at it. Like it's only like this many words, small, two tweets, and I'm looking for the problem, and I just don't see it. But I'm also aware that we're all seeing what we expect to see, what we want to see. So it could be an illusion. There could be a problem there that I'm not seeing. But other people are seeing that he's reversed himself and blah, blah. What I saw was he has a problem with the FISA rules being misused. And so he has a problem with their misuse, but they need the tool, and if they have a little more safeguard on it, he'll be fine with it. So is that how you read it? All I read was the tool had been misused. He needs to tweak it so it's not as easily misused. Did you see any kind of a big problem there? And it's being reported the same way his DACA meeting was being reported. They're listening to the words and they're just interpreting them as different things. That when he says DACA in that context, the DACA meeting, he is talking about trading that for the other things he needs, especially the wall. And other people are saying, oh no, you just said DACA in that sentence. You just said DACA. That one sentence had only DACA in it. So now you've changed changed what you're saying. And nothing like that is happening. He just uses it as a shorthand for the DACA negotiations that include the wall. Said he was for a clean DACA bill. Well, what does that mean? A clean DACA bill. A clean DACA bill would be, here's DACA, here's your wall, here's E-Verify or whatever else he can get. What does it mean to be clean? You could just interpret it any way you wanted to. With a cloth. So some people are saying he meant it without a wall. Does anybody legitimately think that there was any time the president thought in his head, yeah, I'll just do DACA without getting anything in return? How in the world clean, let us accept for a moment that you believe that clean in that context means negotiating nothing away for it. Does that mean that if you've interpreted a clean DACA bill to mean I'm not going to ask anything in return, do you believe that the most negotiating president of all time, in the middle of negotiating, suddenly decided that he didn't want anything in return? Does that sound even a little bit likely? Versus, he used a word in a way that you didn't expect it to be used. He wants it to be clean, because clean just could mean a lot of things. Could mean everybody understands it and it's simple. It could mean just simple. And by the way, I believe he said that right after he had explained, first we'll negotiate, a few things like DACA and the wall, and then separately we'll look at comprehensive immigration reform. So in that context, clean meant clean first phase, which includes the wall, followed by a messier negotiation for comprehensive immigration. Now, that's what I heard. Everything I heard made perfect sense. He said, let's do two phases. First one will be a clean DACA bill just for the wall. We'll limit the number of things we're talking about. He might have wanted to get a few extra things in there, but I don't know. And then he said, but the bigger discussion, which will be messy as opposed to clean, will be about comprehensive immigration reform. That's what I heard. Now, whether you like that or not, I don't know. Clean also means no pork projects. Correct. Clean, if you overinterpret clean, you can make it mean anything you want. It was not, so it was Trump perhaps not using a word the way it is typically used in the government way. That's possible. But to make something of that, it's crazy. Most people thought it meant only DACA. Well, I'd like to see a poll on that. And you might be right. It's entirely possible that most people thought he meant only DACA without getting anything in return. But keep in mind that most people would be happy with getting just a DACA deal and nothing in return. Like most people in the world would want that. So it's the clearest case you've seen of people just hearing what they wanted to hear. I'm just looking at your comments. I say that for the replay people who just see me staring at the screen and don't see your comments. Is Wolf a troll? Well, he's an author. Right, McCarthy just clarified that's all he did, right? Even Rush thought it was only DACA? I'd have to hear that in context. It's possible. Yes, that is Snickers back there. Am I having fun? Yeah. You know, I'd rather be here doing this than anything else I'm doing. That's actually completely true. So when Wolf Blitzer interviewed Michael Wolff, it was sort of an all-Wolf situation. Wolf, what do you think? Well, Wolf. Well, Wolf. Well, my answer, Wolf, is, tell me, Wolf. Yes, I am procrastinating. Somebody called me a Nazi on Reddit, and somebody corrected them and said I was just dopey. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that correction. 8 Twitter whistleblowers. So keep an eye on this whole Twitter shadow banning story. My position, which I'm happy to change, and you know, there's nothing stopping me from changing this position. I could change it in a heartbeat if I see something that's persuasive. But I saw a lot of people talking about shadow banning. I did not see a direct piece of evidence where somebody said, I did it, or I worked with somebody who did it, or I watched it happen. But it gets close to that, but it doesn't really get there. So if it were a court case, there's nothing we've seen yet that would suggest it. Any update on the weed issue? No, not really. The stock market hopes it goes well. That's what Trump said about his doctor appointment. All right, everybody. I'm going to get off here in a moment. But first, let us drink one more time. We'll lift a glass, a mug, a container of some sort, a vessel, a beverage vessel. Lift your beverage vessel and drink the tears of your enemies. Can you grow weed in the tabletop garden? I will give you an answer to